Hey, Yitzchak. All right, brother. So you came to Israel when you were the age of 27 for the first time. How was that for you?
Well, it was a big surprise because I had a Greek name, and it was springtime. It was before the Easter holidays, and I went to this little community in the forest to visit. I had a mobile home. Was with my wife and one daughter, and she was pregnant with our second child. And the community was 8 families at the time, originally from California, some from the East Coast, hippies, as we call them, from the 60s, 70s, living on the land, working the land and studying the Bible. And I drove in thinking I'd spend 20 minutes, just, say hi, and then continue on my way. I was going back to Greece by putting the bus on the boat. And lo and behold, somebody asked me if I was Jewish, and I said no. So he said to me, well, what's your mother's name? So I said Elian Levi, and he said, Levi's a Jewish name. I didn't know anything. And then another guy who was listening to the conversation said, why don't you stay, because Pesach's coming. And I said, who's he? Thinking some guy called Pesach is coming to the community. So when I found out I was Jewish, because I'd spent many, many years in India studying to be a yoga teacher and meditation teacher in I think it was 1970, 71, I was already spiritually inclined. And so for me, it wasn't just a coincidence that I found out, that I was Jewish. It was the next sign on the journey of life. So I decided, along with my wife, to stay 2 months, and we lived on our mobile home. And I, learned what it was to be a Jew and what Judaism meant. And prior to that, I thought I was halfway up the spiritual mountain because I'd been studying very intensively 5-6 years, yoga and meditation, and going to India quite a lot. And when I found out I was a Jew, I realized I hadn't even begun climbing. So it was like a blow, it was a shock, And I realized to really be a Jew, you need a few lifetimes. It's not something you just learn overnight. So it was hard, but I took it well. And then after 2-3 months, we basically went back to Europe. And at that time, I was selling very cute black and white children's posters on the streets of Europe. Very cheap, like $1 a piece. But we would make sometimes $500 a day. Cash in your pocket, no tax and all that stuff. So I went to Brussels, where my mother lived, and my wife gave birth to our second child. There was a boy. We'd had a girl prior. And then we decided to immigrate to New Zealand. And I said, I'll be Jewish in New Zealand. It's like, here was like, it was I wasn't looking forward to being here because Judaism can be very much, you can't do this and you have to do that. And it reminded me of boarding school, and I did too much boarding school. So I thought, I'll go to New Zealand. It's known as God's country because it's very, very beautiful. And I'll be Jewish there, So we went to New Zealand. And New Zealand was like coming to the Garden of Eden when you hadn't done the work. It was like, everything was easy, everything was beautiful, everybody was friendly. You could find a job, a little home out in the country. No challenges whatsoever. And I thought to myself, what am I doing here? It's like, it's too easy here. It's like, but the funny thing was, when we first came to the Moshav, right, and found out I was Jewish, didn't meet Shlomo, but I heard his music. For those of you who don't know Shlomo, he was a minstrel, a singing rabbi, passed away unfortunately 30 years ago, but very special. So we were driving to Europe where my wife could give birth, and I was listening to Shlomo music. My daughter was asking me, she was 2.5, asking me to tell her stories every night about the Moshav. And I had picked up a couple of hippies along the way to sell for me on the street. And they were all Jews, Israelis. I never had Jews at my bus before. So it was like God saying to me, okay, you want to go to New Zealand? go, but I'm gonna reel you back in when the time comes, which is exactly what happened. So after 2 weeks in New Zealand, basically I put this little second-hand car at the airport, and I had a little notice, this car has been abandoned, and we took a flight back to India. We were coming back to Israel, but we went via Bombay, because I had a very good spiritual Indian friend who gave me very good advice. He said, go back to Israel, find out what it really means to be a Jew, and you can always come back to India. Because my dream was to be in India and continuing studying, and India was 10 times cheaper than Israel, and I had enough money from the posters to be in India for 10, 15 years without working, and just study spirituality or practice it. Anyway, we came back to the Moshav, stayed for 18 years, didn't leave, basically just lived here. My mother would come and visit, once a year. And she took it very well, by the way, that I went into Judaism, because she never raised me as a Jew. She gave me a Greek name. She married a Greek man who was my father. But she took it very well. She was very happy that we were settled here. And she came every year for 40, 45 years. Yeah.
So you've reached this stage where you're kind of already well known as a painter. So how does it feel to be well known?
I mean, I don't have fame the way, people think of fame, but it's nice to be appreciated, to be recognized somewhat, because it's a reward, it's like it's a gift. And when you're appreciated, it gives you, puts a lot of wind into your sails, and you can continue moving forward with positivity. So in that way, being recognized somewhat is nice.
If you could choose one piece of art to own, to have, to appreciate, what piece of art would that be?
It's a good question, and it's a difficult one to answer because there's quite a few. There's many great painters in my mind from the past. There's maybe one that I like who's still alive. I think his name's David Hockney. But on the level of genius, because throughout history there's been windows of time where geniuses appear. Like in the 15th century in Florence, you had people like Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci. And today we have Elon Musk. He's not a painter, but he's an amazing person. I think I would love to have a Vermeer. Vermeer was a Flemish painter. He was married, and I think he had more than 12 children. He was always poor. His paintings took forever. They weren't very big, maybe about this big. And there's only 30 paintings that exist in the world that are Vermeers. But he painted in a way that is beyond belief. He really was truly a genius. So yeah, if I could have a little Vermeer, that would be very nice. He was around like 400 years ago.
Well, you haven't been producing art for 400 years, but you have been doing it for quite a while now. So how do you still manage to produce good art?
I have a few good habits that enable the body to stay, sound. So if your body's quiet and it's not disturbing you with aches and pains, then you can sit and be focused, because a painter, unlike a musician, works alone. So you're not, nobody's clapping, nobody's applauding. It's a deep meditation. So the body has to be quiet so that the mind can focus. And also, I like to bring spirituality. By that I mean, as opposed to painting, I can paint realistically, let's say a landscape, but I want to feel that there's a certain holiness, for lack of a better word, in the landscape, in the portrait, or in the custom-made ketubah. I want it to have something that's not quite earthly. It's there's some heaven in it. So that in itself is an incentive. And also I always say to myself, whenever I do another painting, I say, this is your last painting, God forbid, but it's your last painting. So you give it your all, which means you're trying to go over and above what you've managed to achieve in the past. You want to like paint better than you've ever painted in this painting. So I get a lot of satisfaction from that. And so that, I think that's the incentive. I've been able to keep the body quiet and then have that wish to do something amazing because it's my last painting.
What advice would you give a young artist?
I would tell them, not that I believe in art schools per se, because they have a tendency to want you to paint along the lines of what they believe in. Let's say there's some schools that teach realism, which means, you learn to paint a very realistic painting. I think it's a good foundation to get some skills down. So I would recommend maybe going to a good art school for a year, maybe 2, and really learn how to draw and how to paint really well. But don't go too long in that direction because you need to not lose yourself. And we're all very unique. Once you've got the basic, down, the foundation, then you can build on that, putting yourself into it. So let's say if you go abstract, which means leaves room for the imagination. An abstract painting doesn't let you know what it is. It's for you to decide what it is, what you need to find. But a lot of, let's say, abstract painters or, there's many painters today, they're not necessarily good. And you can see they don't have a foundation. So I would recommend first learning the basics and then go and do whatever you want to do. But you've got to, it's like building a house. You've got to have a strong foundation and then you can go do what you want, because whatever you're going to do is standing firmly.
You were saying before that an artist, one of the good habits that help you create good art is living a healthy lifestyle.
Right.
So I would ask you, what advice would you give a person to live a healthier lifestyle?
Certain things stand out in life, if you just look around, that are free. So what do we have the most of on this planet that we live in is air. So you should try to live in an environment where the air is good. So if you're near a forest, for example, as we are, thank God, there's a lot of good oxygen being created by the trees. So first air, good air, and then you have to have good water. This planet is 80% water, we're 80% water, so you don't have to do anything, but I suggest you drink good water, which might mean a lot of filtering, buy an expensive filter, but that's okay. So fresh air, fresh water, sunlight, and also to be grounded. Means to say at least every day you spend half an hour, preferably more, walking barefooted or sitting outside barefooted. So those are the basics, and those are all free. If you've got those down, you can heal yourself very much so. And then not to eat too much. You can eat, I would avoid white sugar and white flour, but you can have your coffee and your chocolate, but again, not too much. You can eat a little bit of meat. Try to eat organic, so you're not eating a lot of food with spray. But I think the trick is to eat a few meals a day, slowly, don't be in a hurry, and try to eat foods that have life in it, life force. And I think you can't go wrong. It's not so complicated. It's just a matter of deciding to go along that way. And it pays because, your body can be around for 70, 80, 90, 100, more, 110 years, and still be serving you, and still enabling you to be independent. But there's a price to pay. Life is like a marketplace. You want something, so you have to give something. Nothing's for free,